All right, so today is day 2 of the Practicing Obedience Challenge. Cycle 1, day 2. I gotta be clear because there's gonna be several cycles. Okay, so let's get in here. Today, what I thought I was going to talk about is not what I'm going to talk about. Um, I'm kind of going to talk about willingness and obedience, but talk about it from a different perspective. We're going to talk about it from the perspective of being willing but disobedient. Okay. And we're going to read from the scripture, First Samuel chapter 15, some verses within First Samuel chapter 15 as our exemplar of what it looks like to be willing yet disobedient. Before we get into that scripture or those verses, I want to just go over some definitions real quick. The first definition that we're going to talk about is the definition of being willing. What does it mean to be willing? Ask yourself, what does it mean to be willing? Well, the dictionary says that willing means to be ready, to be eager, prepared to do something. Another way that it's stated is done readily. So something is done readily, like ready to get her done, basically. There is a blog called On Assignment by God, which defines willingness as a readiness to be obedient. So the readiness is for preparation and on time and on point to be obedient. It also, that particular blog, the definition reads, or being prepared to be obedient. Okay, some other words that are important for willingness is not choosing to refuse, right? So when you're willing, you have an option to refuse, but you're choosing to do the thing that you're being asked to do without reluctance. So these are all words that depict what it looks like to be willing to do something, right? Not moving slow with the direction. Okay, so now let's talk about obedience a little bit. Some words to define obedience are compliance with an order, request or law, submission to another's authority. So that right there is interesting when you think about the fact that in order to obey something, it has to be something that is outside of one's own desires, right? Or how can I say this? Oftentimes, when we are encouraged to obey something, it may be something outside of our own natural human wants and desires, right? It may not be something that is we're desiring ourselves, but it's something that we're doing because it's an authority figure over us is giving us direction. And so we are moving in that direction because we obey and we're in alignment, in agreement. We're not reluctant to move into the thing that the authority figure is requesting of us. And I want to pause for a second because can one really obey their own desires? Yes, one can, right? One can say, I want to do that. I'm going to go do that. They can be willing and obedient to do the things that they desire to do. But when we think about God and we think about mankind, and we think about our, what's the word? I want to say it, but I feel like I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Starts with a P. But anyway, that word. Um, man's point of view, I'll just say it like that, oftentimes in the human state, not God's point of view because God's ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, right? Like he knows more than we do. And so sometimes we feel like we know something that may not be in agreement with what it is that God is saying. However, if we are willing and obedient, we will put aside what we think and pick up what he says, right? Because he knows best. Okay, so we talked about some definitions for willingness, which is really prepared to do, right? Let's go with that one. Prepared to do the thing that is being requested, prepared to obey. And we talked about what obedience is, which let me tell you how I'm defining it. To obey is to hear instruction and fully comply. That is the definition of obey that I've put together. Is to hear instruction, because in order to obey something, you have to hear, right? You have to have an ear to hear what it is being spoken in order to obey instruction, or order to do the thing that is being requested. And then I added the word fully comply, or the words fully comply, because, well, you'll see in a minute as we read 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses, I think we'll do 1 through 4, then, no, excuse me, 1 through 5, then 7, then 10 through 15.